Gaola, Iris R. Bliss 3A. Chapter 5.
Data collection techniques.
What do you mean by data collection techniques?
Data collection techniques include interviews, observations, questionnaires, and relevant documents.
Pre-questionnaire planning. A process will be given here in brief outline form as a way of reviewing the major steps and of emphasizing decisions that should be made before the data collection instrument is selected or designed. First, define the problem and purpose. Consider previous, related research, the advice of experts, and hypothesize a solution to the problem or at least identify research questions, the answers to which will shed some light on the problem. Identify the information needed to test the hypothesis. Identify the potential respondents or subjects. Select the best or most appropriate technique for collecting the necessary data. Advantages of the questionnaire. Disadvantages of the questionnaire. Constructing the questionnaire. Proper construction of the questionnaire is essential to its success. In general, the researcher must consider his or her information needs and the characteristics of the participants. Type of question according to information needed. Factual questions. Questions used to ascertain such things as the respondent's age, gender, opinion, and attitude questions. Questions intended to determine a person's ideas, inclinations, prejudices, convictions. Information questions. Questions designed to measure the respondent's knowledge about some topic. They typically require the greatest response time. Self-perception questions. Questions quite similar to attitude questions, but restricted to one's opinions about himself or herself. Standards of action questions. Questions used to determine how respondents would act in certain circumstances. Questions about actual past or present behavior. Questions that potentially fall within some of the categories of questions already identified but tend to be narrower in that they focus on behavior. Projective questions. Questions that allow respondents to answer questions indirectly by imposing their personal beliefs, attitudes, and so on onto others. In selecting or designing questionnaire items, the researcher must consider the question format that will best obtain the information desired. The form of the question in turn determines the method. There are two basic types of questions:
Open-ended questions and fixed addressable questions.
Open-ended, or unstructured questions, as the name indicates, are designed to permit free responses from participants rather than ones limited to specific alternatives. Fixed response or structured questions, also known as closed questions, limit the responses of the participant to stated alternatives. The possible responses may range from a simple yes or no. Question content and selection. The researcher must next decide what specific questions to ask and consider their content and wording. The questioner should first ask himself or herself whether a specific question is actually necessary or will be useful. The way in which the contents of questionnaire items are worded can also affect their validity and reliability. Sources of error. Before continuing with the outline of the procedures for developing a questionnaire, it may be worthwhile to consider some of the types of questionnaire error.
Researcher bias, sponsorship bias, imperfections of design, respondent interpretations, time lapse, circumstances, response bias, reactive insight.
Evaluating the questionnaire. Distribution of the questionnaire. In deciding when to mail the questionnaire, the researcher should take into account common vacation periods and other such factors that may affect how quickly persons are likely to respond. Email questionnaires were more often used because of the ease of transmission, the immediacy of the delivery, and the low cost of distribution. The interview. Developing the interview. One of the first steps must be development of the list of questions to be asked, or the interview schedule. An additional step in the development of the interview involves the training of interviewers. Advantages of interview.
It almost always produces a better response rate. It is also possible to employ interview schedules of greater length than comparable questionnaires without jeopardizing a satisfactory response rate.
Focus group interviews. The focus group interview technique can be used as a self-contained research method or in combination with other quantitative and qualitative research methods. Analysis and reporting of the focus group data. There are then two basic approaches to analyzing focus group data: ethnographic summary and content analysis.
The content analysis approach produces numerical descriptions of the data. Content analysis is the tallying of mentions of very specific factors. Ethnography involves establishing rapport, selecting research participants, transcribing observations and conversations, and keeping diaries. Telephone interviews.
Another important type of interview is the telephone interview. Because more and more interviews are being conducted over the telephone, this technique deserves special attention. Advantages of telephone interview. It tends to provide significant savings in actual time and cost in contrast to the personal interview. It can be conducted more quickly after an event has occurred. It is generally easier to supervise, train, and monitor the staff for a telephone interview than for a personal interview. Telephone interviewing does require some special skills. One major disadvantage of the telephone interview is that the process obviously favors those people who have telephones. Observation and usability testing. Advantages of observational research. Limitations of observational research. Unstructured observation. There are essentially two basic types of observation: structured and unstructured.
Structured observation is a more formal technique, often used in quantitative studies in order to provide systematic description or to test causal hypotheses. Unstructured observation is sometimes equated with participant observation, but its most important characteristic reflects the fact that the researcher does not have predetermined sets of categories.
There are steps that can be taken to increase the accuracy of unstructured observations. Usability testing. Evaluating usability involves measuring the degree to which a user can successfully learn and use a system or service.